and just, and a violation of the fundamental principles of international law, which honor the sovereign equality of nations, upholds their territorial integrity, and advocates the peaceful resolution of all disagreements. Commitment to peace makes certain fundamental concessions inevitable. This summit should not be a meeting of just friends. This should be a meeting of both friends and foe. To succeed in this positive trajectory, Russia must be on the table.
I want to see a day when Africa, the richest continent on the planet Earth, will be able to speak with one voice and ensure that our people get the rightful share of the wealth of this earth. We want to be able, we are not asking for charity.
We have built a big reputation as a country. We have built friends. Some friends told me, how much do you want to pay? I said, I'm not ready to pay more than 20 million. They said, bring 10 million, we will give you the plane.
We're not asking for charity. We're only asking for fairness in the international world market. We want to see that Africans are able to add value to our raw materials, and that the people of Africa are respected. We want to see that we are able to expand trade among our people, and that it's easier for Africans to travel within Africa.
Nimetembea nchi nyingi kutafuta vile tunaweza kusukuma maendeleo ya Kenya, na nimepanga marafiki wengi. Tuko na marafiki sasa wa World Bank, tuko na wa IMF, tuko na wa Marekani, tuko na wa China, tuko na wale wengine wote.
But you don't need to have a visa to come to Malawi or to go to Zambia. Africa will stand together. We stand firmly with you at this very sad hour.
The United States will compete, and will compete vigorously, and lead with our values and our strength. We'll stand up for our allies and our friends.
Make America richer and safer and stronger and prouder and more beautiful than ever before. I think we have a final shot at it.
All right, of course, that is a soapbox just giving us an indication of what has been happening on the global map. We want to circle back and we shall discuss, of course, what is happening, of course, with American politics and also the burial of Malawian Vice President. People's Revolution is in the offing. Mashara Monene, we had promised to circle back with this. Is Kenya ripe for revolution? As Mashara will start his article in yesterday's Daily Nation.
Well, my namesake.
Your namesake, yes.
Yeah, sometimes he's right. And he's not wrong this time. Yeah, I think that's what we have all been saying. Things have been going wrong. There is evidence of unconcern at the top. And when there is serious unconcern at the top, people revolt. And we are seeing some manifestation of it. For some reason, maybe because he does not like history, William Ruto has given the impression that he doesn't care about people, about what happens here and there and there. That impression is given. And some of the uprising we are seeing is because of that impression. And why is it that he ends up giving the wrong impression? I'd like to assume it's the wrong impression, that he probably cares, but he doesn't sound it, he doesn't look it. And why is that he gives this impression? He surrounds himself with advisors, if they are advisors, whom he does not trust, or who have no capacity to do anything, or even the impression that he does not listen anyway. Those are all those factors. Because the actions associated with his government and his words are two different things. He says this, and people see this. He says, tighten your belt, and he hires jets, you know, and tells us that some foreign friends gave him, you know, which raises fundamental questions about sovereignty. Who are these friends who know what he's thinking and discussions enough to call him and say, okay, we give you some aid? Now, are those people who give that kind of assistance then telling him what to do?
They're not doing it for free.
Yeah, there's nothing free. Then going to Europe and America, they give him jets, go. And he just came, the irony, he just came from Europe to talk about Ukraine. And comes here and finds his country on fire because of these policies. There is a disconnect between his words and perceived performance. So when Macharia says that there is likely to be an uprising, it's true. There's likely to be, but it does not have to be. You know, there is a clear connection between good domestic policies and good foreign policy. Right now, they are not matching because the domestic policies are in shambles. And so going out to look as if you are making a good statement, and those statements do not make Kenya look very good. Talk about everything when it's collapsing at home. The image that has been created, whether right or wrong, is that Kenya is a puppet of the US. Is a proxy, is a nyapara. And although there is a lot of praise from Joe Biden and the West saying that Ruto is the spokesman for Africa, actually these people, these conceptuals, they've always found somebody to be the spokesman for Africa at a particular time. And then when his usefulness is over, they dump him. And they look for another what? Spokesman for Africa. Right now, Ruto is the spokesman for Africa in the Western capitals. But is he in Africa? That's why some of the problems are the image things. In the 1950s and 60s, it used to be Tom Mboya. You know, that sort of thing. Then it went on. At present, Ruto is the one. Has he been accepted that way in Africa itself? Or is he somebody created, pampered, and promoted by Joe Biden, who needs help in Haiti, and who needs visible support in Ukraine? And Ruto appears to have done a very good job of giving Biden that legitimacy from the African perspective. If you notice those meetings he went, the G7 and the other one, he was kind of a lonely fellow, some kind of a decoration. You say, well, what is he doing there?
Ramaphosa was missing there as well.
I mean, the imaging, that's what I'm saying, the media imaging was not very good in the whole thing. And whatever he said was a non-issue, in the first place. But he served a purpose of giving impression of diversity. The whole world agrees to this thing. When actually, they don't made up their mind. Now, the Geneva meeting, and I think some things came out, was misplaced, disorganized. How can you have a peace discussion without a major player in it? In the first place, the whole thing was kakamami. They're talking about creating peace in Ukraine without a major player. So what was the purpose of it? But to make the people on one side feel good about it, which was also an indication of desperation. Things have not gone the way they thought they would be. So it created an impression that they are doing something about it, which they were not. Other than chest thumping, patting themselves in the back, and then say, oh, yeah. And then at least Ruto says something good, that you are doing something criminal to take Russian money to give it to. At least that's what he said. But the whole thing was a charade. Now, Should we be, as a country, be involved in such charades?
Should we, as it were, really show where our faces is leaning or where we're leaning to? We have to take categorically. I think from the
we have done the right. Ruto has done the right thing to say this is where he belongs. There's none of this non-alignment thing. It's like in the 60s, we were non-aligned on the side of the West. No.
We profess to be non-aligned.
You are non-aligned on the side of the West.
We're basically agents of the West, not just to be the West, but the agents of the West in Africa.
You are not even clear non-aligned, we are just zoom. And Biden, when Ruto was in Washington, Biden said it, I think twice or so, very clearly. The reason he was rewarding Ruto with a state visit is because he supports him in Haiti and Ukraine. And now this, the Ukraine thing was reinforced in this trip. That's what it is. That Kenya might get at least a few military equipment, like helicopters, and the expansion of the Manda base. And I hope they do a little bit more than just expand the airport. This is maybe build a big bridge between
using it themselves.
Mokoa and the Hindi and the Manda base, so that when you land there, you don't have to take a boat to get. Do a few things. You get a few of those little things. But essentially, what is Kenya doing in this thing? Particularly to be, when you are being portrayed as an extension of NATO, without calling it NATO, because that's what it is. And if you're an extension of NATO, then you'll be called to do NATO things, although you are not NATO.
Right.
So exactly what is, that has not been discussed properly, and Kenyans do need to discuss this. What does it mean for the future of Kenya to be sucked into this thing?
All right, let's see what was happening. Faramali Mionet will say something briefly.
No, on the Ukraine issue, I mean, our president is entitled to his own opinions on these things. Personally, I have my issues.
He's entitled to his own opinion. I think his opinion will carry the opinion of the entire nation.
Look. When this man is in administration, he's the president of the country. He runs the government here. So the government policies, I mean, are very clear to us. If you ask me personally, I think we have been with the West for 70 years of colonialism and 65 years since we became independent. We haven't gained anything from that. And I think it's either time we should behave like South Africa and go on where our moral compass is. Ukraine is the West has lost. Ukraine is destroyed completely, and Russia will never lose this war, I can assure you. And the economy of the Russians is increasing like hell. And they have overtaken, and just watch now, in the shortest possible time, whether it is artificial intelligence or it is the technology which powers our iPhones and the rest of it, the Russians are way ahead of what most people think they are. So on the overall, and because we don't have a history of colonization, exploitation, mineral, extraction from it, they in a way should have been the natural people we sit down with and see how we can deal with, and we can have an equal kind of a partnership in the manner in which we bring out our resources. We have a security system in which we are not going to be at the mercy of anybody else. The way now the small countries in Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso and Senegal now are going independent. That's the direction. And any counter to that politically is for us not going to be a very good thing. It might be in the short term, I can assure you. It might be in the short term because of a lot of things that can happen. But in the long run, we should be able to, in the very least, have a dual track. A dual track, which means we don't become the enemy of anybody because somebody else wants us to become the enemy of anybody. And we keep a very good relationship with the Russians. We can also keep a very good relationships with the West. We don't have to be an enemy for anybody. But in terms of the who is morally right between Zelensky, the boy who was planted, the Zionist boy, Jewish boy who was planted into Ukraine to destroy it, which has done very well, and Ukrainian people's position also is probably very different from what the West will try and portray. and Russia, which has got the Russian-speaking Russians in the eastern Ukraine, who are saying they are entitled to their self-determination, Donetsk and all these places. The people are Russians. People who live in that place are Russians, and they only became part of Russia when Khrushchev was there. And at that time, because they had the Union Soviet Socialist Republic, Crimea, and all those places had nothing. They've never had any Ukrainian as of the races that lived in Ukraine historically been part of that. It became part of that through that Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So if they have to take it back right now because of the discrimination that was meted to them by the Ukrainians, which was akin to Nazism of some kind, or racial profiling of some kind, because within them also they have the Slavic and they have what people who think that they're Aryans themselves. It's a very tricky, much deeper than we see superficially as far as politics goes. I would suggest that we go very slow on that and keep our dual track relationship with both sides. Without necessarily having to antagonize any.
Let me get to Yusuf a bit, because I wanted just to hatch or hack back a bit on the issue of the revolution, and if we also may compare to what happened with the Jasmine Revolution, when we're talking about the Arab Spring. We had a very disenfranchised Mohammed Bouazizi. Was it Bouazizi? Yeah, who actually lit up himself because of the conducive environment that was not there. He was a fruit vendor. Does what happened during then? Do you think the circumstances can be comparable to what is happening here?
Well, I mean, revolutions happen in many ways. And one of the things is growing dissatisfaction and the lack of access or participation in the political process. I think to a certain extent we have a robust political system, a very competitive political system that allows a lot of people to enter the political marketplace from different backgrounds, different
economic
yes. So in a way that acts as a valve to
release valve.
Yeah, release valve to stabilize the country. But there is a point where you would get to where people have a serious dissatisfaction about the ability to participate. For example, the cost of our elections, campaign elections, make a lot of young people to stay out of politics because it is too costly and too demanding. The other thing is the economic factor, which is the key aspect. As if the economy is not going very well and people have been pinched, of course that has been always the case. We have an underclass in Kenya from independence time who live in slum areas, who live in extreme poverty and depressing conditions in rural areas. But there's not enough volume of activism to connect these people, and the Kenyan elite has more or less been riding roughshod over them. But now there is this growing element of protest is at an infancy. It's a new thing. It doesn't have a political movement, nor does it have a clear leadership. And if you look at our situation, Kenya is dominated by the same old political elite. For example, even if I may say, Honorable Farah, he's been in the system during the KANU days.
No.
No, you are representing.
I was in opposition, but of course KANU was in leadership.
Yes. So KANU, then the multi-party system.
You just missed KANU by whiskers.
Yes, and now so if you look at our political elite, it's the parties. KANU has more or less declined. Some people would say have died. The political party that brought Kibaki into office has died.
It's not there. Not even a single MP.
The political party that brought Uhuru into office is in decline.
Serious decline.
And to a certain extent, even UDA, maybe in another 3 or 4
5
may not be the dominant political party. So the political parties die or fade away, but the political elite remains. That's a serious concern because there is no space for upward mobility, for young political new blood, as it were. And that is another serious factor. If we do not bring independent-minded young political activists into the political system, then it is likely to generate anger, resentment, and eventually lead to a revolt. But revolutions don't happen that often as you might think. And I think some people, particularly from the left, would say the conditions for an uprising and a revolt is there. But it requires one element that is completely lacking at the moment, is that there is neither a movement nor a leadership that represent that alternative that maybe Kenyans want. But also sometimes, if you look at history, and I'm a student of history, is that revolutions happen spontaneously, and leaders emerge out of that. And in the case of the Arab Spring, it was completely unexpected. And Tunisia was really not one of the poorest Arab countries, and it had a relatively a more democratic system than the other countries in the Middle East. Yet, it was the spark that led to the famous Egyptian uprising that we saw, which was one of the most exciting. But surprisingly, it was also squashed with the help of the United States. The United States was fearful of the rise of Islamic thought and Islamic leadership, and decided to kill the Egyptian democracy. It threw the bathwater with the baby and has installed or supports a military dictatorship in that country. So I just wanted to also speak on the issue of Ukraine, if you may allow me.
Sure.
I think, yes, I think the position of the president and the government is in favor of a rules-based international system, where there is a respect for the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of nations, and has that theoretical concept that all nations are equal. But yet, the rules-based system has been rubbished and damaged by the very Western governments, Europe and the United States. When it came to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Libya, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and many other countries.
Yemen.
And Yemen. They have waged wars, laws against the laws of international order in many countries. They don't have the moral authority to tell Russia what to do or not to do. And in this particular case, it is not in our national interest to be promoting Western ideas, Western political positions that are focusing on the isolation, because they have placed very heavy sanctions on Russia, and Russia is a major power. We have many more problems in our region that I think the president could easily focus on as an African leader. The DRC is going badly wrong. There's a genocide in Sudan, in Ethiopia, and many of our regional neighbors that require our attention. But another interesting thing is that the president has not spoken in favor of the Palestinian people, whose nation is occupied. Israel has occupied Palestine since 1976. Complete the whole of the West Bank and Gaza. 1967.
But
48 was the original start, but actually the occupation of all the Palestinian land. And when it comes to the genocidal Israeli war on the people of Palestine, our government has been silenced, especially what is happening in Gaza. 120,000 innocent people have been killed there, many of them women and children. It is the worst catastrophe of our times. And we should be careful, therefore, of the consequences of allying ourselves with a particular superpower. In this particular
the president had
of the
aligned himself as far when we had that war freshly breaking out on October the 7th.
He allied himself with Israel.
With Israel.
Very fast. Yeah.
So you would expect now maybe he changes tone, maybe along the way.
I'm not, because of the balance. If you speak about the sovereignty of Ukraine, you support the sovereignty of Ukraine, and you condemn the aggression against what you consider of Russia against Ukraine, why would you not be able to see and speak out against the Israelis on the issue of the Palestinian people, and particularly this brutal, devastating war in Gaza, in which it is widely accepted is a genocidal war? And South Africa has made a name for itself for taking a principled position. So we need a principled, historic-based foreign policy. And the danger of associating yourself, moving away from non-alignment, which has been our tradition, for me is that we would have the danger of being sucked into militarization, using our territory to attack and carry out aggressive wars against other countries, and to be seen as an accomplice in a war and a conflict of no interest to us. So I think we need to be conscious of that particular danger.
Thank you. It's Mashari, then we'll come to you. Mashari, you want to comment on that briefly?
Yeah, well, the Gaza tragedy paints Kenya in not a very nice way. The silence, or their perceived silence, over the atrocities committed in Gaza do not promote Kenya's image as a fair country, as one that can be relied on to stand up when the issues are there. Now, this brings up the question of the crime of provocation, if there is such a thing. And what is this offense of provocation? What Gaza and Ukraine have in common, they supposedly are both guilty of provoking. The Ukrainians provoked the Russians as proxies of the United States, very clearly. But people rarely want to talk about the provocation, of that. But it was clear provocation, deliberate, prompted by the United States and NATO. And so the Russians reacted in the same way that the Hamas supposedly provoked the Israelis. Was it October 14 or 17?
October 7th.
October 7th. They provoked. And when they provoked, the Israelis then reacted, and with the atrocities that are there. The Ukrainians provoked the Russians, and the result. Yet, when it comes to condemnation, some parts are very eager to concentrate on condemning the excesses of Russia in beating up on the Ukrainians, but very quiet on the excesses of Israel in destroying Gaza. And that's a double standard people point out. The prior aggressions, and Mheshimiwa has pointed out, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, even in Syria, these were deliberate things. And the issue of even Arab Spring is very funny. Tunisia was serious, was genuine. Egypt was not. Because we have the authority of Hillary Clinton, who said that they had spent about $20 or $25 million helping to organize the Egyptian Spring, and they were going to spend even more in that. So the so-called Arab Spring was a cooked-up thing. In Tunisia, it was genuine. In other places, it was cooked up. So when these things, the provocations are there, what are you supposed to do? And so it becomes very tricky when you look at it. And I think one of their suggestions is that we need to be careful not to fall into the trap of some other people's design when you are not even sure what it is that they are doing. And being seen to become either anti one force or the other is not the best interest when you can do better than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's when the West talks about democracy, human rights, it's a facade. It's the West is actually much more committed to those differentials based on racism and other interests. 400 years ago, the way they were when they were cutting people away from the transatlantic, and today it is worse, if not as bad as it was those days. Because look at this now, for example. They've said all those countries, democracy, Arab Spring. Arab Spring was created by the American CIA and the Mossad in all those countries. And the idea was not to change those to democratic countries. They don't like any democratic country in any third world country. They want to have dictators whom they can use and basically prop up. Similar to what they had with Mobutu Sese Seko, Bokassa, all the rest were there from the beginning. So then they of course tried to expand NATO all the way to the gates of Russia, all the way to the borders of Russia. Now, Russia cannot accept that. And for us to try and support the West or the Americans on this one right now, I think it's pretty much ill-conceived. We should not do that. And by the way, you really want to see what the West feels about anything? Look at the Israelis, because those are the movers and shakers of the Western political houses. All of it. And when Netanyahu says that I'm going to finish with Gaza and come to Africa, and right now the majority businessmen who are keeping private armies in Congo and taking away all the minerals of Congo are Jews, by the way. The same way they were the main middlemen in the slave trade, transatlantic slave trade from those days. And you know, we've been made to believe, for example, that Hitler was such a bad racist that he hated black people. Only now is when we're realizing that Jesse Owens said that Hitler waved to him, was very happy with him, and the Germans greeted him everywhere in the streets when he won that race. But he never got a congratulatory message or telegram from FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Racism was much more rampant in the US than in Germany at that time. The Germans basically, when you see Hitler shouting those things, now is when they're trying to translate them and the world is getting to know what he was saying. Basically trying to free his country from the clutches of the Jews mafia that was there those days. And that's there all over the world today. So basically Africa is, like he said, we don't want to get into those, what they call crosshairs of these conflicts, that global conflicts that are going on. You remember we had all this Osama bin Laden blowing up the Cooperative House and all this American embassy and the rest of it. Everything had its genesis in the Entebbe raid of 1977 or 76? Or
76.
76. When Kenyatta facilitated the Israelis to come through here, plus the Norfolk, what happened in Norfolk. And Palestinians have never had as seen as what they call impartial, or other people who were independent from that conflict in one way or the other. They have seen us always as being lapdogs for the designs and the desires of the West and Israel for that matter.
Thank you.
The political elite in Kenya today has never been a genuine, as a body, of course the exceptions to the rule always, but as a body has never been a genuine nationalistic, basically altruistic, people who don't want to make any gains or any wealth out of a change of guard, but they've always gone back also in their tribal cocoons at the appropriate time. All of them went back to their homes, they went back to their villages. So the bottom line was that we've never had a very genuine middle-class movement in our country here, which only saw Kenya as the target, and that we should develop the four corners and unite this country through the four corners. No, people who always saw it, it's our moment right now to take over. And you can see, when NAC came in, those of them who are with us in the movement immediately went on the other side to be part of the eating bloc, and basically to protect that because theirs was in there.
Thank you.
And we remember when Michuki was asked about these things, why don't we change the constitution? He said, what's the purpose now? The idea when we were agitating for constitutional rewriting in this country was to get Moi out. We have gotten Moi out and we're sitting on the chair. So basically, until such a
But
time that
Michuki was never in the forefront of
no,
getting rid of
I'm,
vote.
I'm just saying he basically was speaking for the psyche of a section of this country. This country's middle class, or rather revolutions that you're talking about, can only become a significant and progressive thing for the future if we have a national outlook, national conversation, and have a national body to move that.
Right.
But not just for desire of one group trying to use the rest to access power, that's all. And then immediately they dump everything else.
Right, thank you. We just want to get some briefings of course, what is happening currently also in Africa, where Malawians gather to mourn Vice President Saulo's Klaus Chilima and heavy security on Monday, a day after people from his home district launched protest over the government's response to the plane crash that killed him and 8 others last week. Chilima, who was 51, was laid to rest in his village of Insipe in the district of Ncheu, about 160 kilometers southeast of the capital Lilongwe, the evening before the crowd, who said officials did not move quickly enough to mount a search and rescue mission when the military plane disappeared, blockaded the road and threw stones at vehicles in the funeral cottage as it arrived, or at the funeral cottage as it arrived. At one point on Sunday evening, a car traveling on the main road crashed into the crowd, killing 4 people and injuring more than a dozen. Police say this. President Lazarus Chakwera, who has called for an independent investigation into the plane crash, and the response attended the burial, or to the response I should say, attended the burial on Monday, but did not address the mourners. Chilima was the leader of the United Transformation Movement Party. He partnered with Chakwera to form the ruling Tonse Alliance and was his running mate when they secured their 2020 election victory. Relations between the two, however, had become tense ahead of the 2025 presidential election, in which the vice president was expected to challenge the president. Chilima was arrested in 2022 over graft allegations. However, a court dropped the charges against him last month after the Director of Public Prosecutions filed a notice for the case to be discontinued. Chilima had denied any wrongdoing. Now, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution on Thursday, that is June 13th, demanding that Sudan's parliamentary force immediately hold its siege of the only capital in the vast western region of Darfur that it doesn't control, and where more than 1 million people are reportedly trapped. The British-sponsored resolution, which was approved by a vote of 14 to 0, with Russia abstaining, also calls on the paramilitary, a rapid support force, and Sudanese military to seek an immediate cessation of hostilities, leading to an end to the more than a year war. It expresses grave concern at the spreading violence and credible reports that the rapid support forces are carrying out ethnically motivated violence in El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, as well as last year in El Geneina in West Darfur. Britain's UN ambassador, Barbara Woodward, told the council that after the vote, that the resolution sends a clear message that RSF must immediately stop the siege of El Fasher and that all sides steps back from the brink. Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, the leader of the RSF, has reportedly received support from Russia's Wagner mercenaries group. UN experts said in a recent report that the RSF has also received support from Arab allied communities and new military supply lines running through Chad, Libya, and South Sudan. Now, 2 more political parties, the Patriotic Alliance, that is PA, and GOOD, have signed the Government of National Unity, GNU, statement of intent, taking the GNU above the 2 majority required in the National Assembly to change the constitution in South Africa. The GNU now comprises 5 political parties, that is NCDA, IFP, PA, and GOOD. The collective holds 273, and that is out of 400 seats in the National Assembly, or 68% of the seats. However, it is still looking at roping in more political parties, including the Freedom Front Plus, which appears to be eager to govern. FF Plus, that is spokesperson Walter Wessels, confirmed this, that the party had been approached by the ANC on Friday and had reached the statement of intent. And the Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin congratulated South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa on his, of course, re-election as president on Monday, reflecting on continued good relations with Pretoria. Despite uncertainty over Moscow's more than 2-year-old invasion of Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine have jostled for support from African nations since the 2022 invasion, with each country's foreign minister embarking on several regional tours. South Africa's long-standing links with Moscow, as with a number of African states, date back to Soviet times, when Moscow was a prominent backer of liberation movements and the fight to end apartheid spearheaded by the ANC. South Africa initially denounced Russia's February 2022 invasion, but has since adopted a more nuanced position, including abstaining in several votes in the UN General Assembly condemning Russian actions. Well, and it seems Kenya will be in August hosting the second nuclear forum between the US and Africa as the country gears up to join the League of Nations, generating part of the electricity from nuclear power. The forum will attract top officials from the US nuclear energy sector to offer more insights on the technology, besides pursuing possible engagements agreements as more African countries seek to pursue power generation from nuclear plants. Kenya plans to set up a nuclear power plant and has already picked Kilifi at the coast as a preferred host of the maiden nuclear power plant, with the alternative being the neighboring Kwale South. Kwale, that is Kwale. South Africa is the only African country currently generating electricity from a nuclear plant. Egypt is also setting up a plant with a capacity of 4,400 megawatts energy. Kenya and Ghana are racing to build nuclear power plants, and Kenya has set up an ambitious target of commencing the construction of a nuclear plant in 2027 and commissioning it by 2034. Right, and of course my director is also priming me that Putin, of course, has landed in North Korea. Right, that's another frontier, especially in trying to amalgate support as far as the Russia war is concerned. Maybe we can just get our closing remarks from our panelists, beginning with you, Yusuf Hassan, your closing remarks.
Well, it has been a very interesting week, very exciting in some ways, and we're looking forward to see how the rest of the week shapes out. I'm particularly concerned because yesterday and probably even today we've had bulldozers in our informal settlements demolishing houses and
the demolition is still ongoing.
Yes, and properties along the Nairobi River. Yesterday the bulldozers were in Kiambu and they started the demolitions very late and left a lot of people with children out into the open. I would like to call upon the government to stop these demolitions at this particular moment and spare the people, and also to help those people who have been displaced as a result of this particular displacement. They're not getting the help that had been promised by the government, and I hope the authorities can go to Kiambu and see what the demolitions have done, and to see many of the families who have been left out with their children.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I would like to welcome Weshimiwa. Demolition of houses is irresponsible. It's not what's...
Without alternative.
Without alternative. Yes, without alternatives. But first of all, demolitions is responsible when you leave people stranded and at night and all those things, and that's not what they promised. So I would like to echo the Mheshimiwa's sentiment on that one, that the government needs to rethink itself to what it is doing. Which brings me to the issue of there is need for redefinition of marginalization, taking into account the question of equity, proper equity, and have a thorough debate on what is it that it means to have equity in the whole thing. And it's good what the young people are doing, the resistance or uprising or protest, whatever they are called. It is very good for the country. And it shows that the country has a great future, because things will not go wrong with people just being docile. They will do something. And by doing that, the country has a chance to rectify and go back to the right path. That's what. So it is very good that what the youth are doing. And maybe it may encourage the president and his team to think of policies afresh.
Thank you.
And consult widely, because they don't. And Mheshimiwa is here, he's very got good ideas. They should be using.
Thank you. Right. Paramali, your closing remarks?
I agree with Professor. I agree with Professor in the sense that this country needs to have a national conversation. The Kenya we want. Which way Kenya? That national conversation is going to unite our vision for this country. And that vision has to have a serious paradigm shift. Because all along we've been insisting very much on the intensification of development in the high potential area and the areas that produce presidents. The areas that produce presidents. Now, let's focus right now in making sure that the rest catch up with the center. And that means serious disproportionate resources to be allocated to those peripheral areas to open up. Because this place is already clogged. We don't have any more space. You see what I mean? And open it up. Then there's going to be a common feeling across the four corners of this country that this country belongs to us. That people, when they're coming from Lodwar or North Horr or Mandera, they will not say that you're going to Kenya. Because that's what they say now. You see what I mean? When we have that national conversation and then we have that ability to bring ourselves all and lift the nation together.
Thank you.
Is when you can have a revolution. You can't have a revolution before that.
Thank you, Farah.
Because a revolution right now is going to be those who were used to monopolizing the national resources at the expense of the rest. And now the conflict is between themselves. The two centers.
Thank you.
One is fighting the other.
Thank you.
And the rest of the country is out there just to watch
Thank you,
spectators in a stadium.
Thank you, Farah.
Soccer stadium.
Right, member of Parliament.
Arsenal and Man City.
All right, we need to go. Farah Maalim, member of Parliament, Adab, and of course, international affairs commentator as well. Thank you for that. I want to thank you.
You don't expect to say 1 mile, one vote and 1 shilling, and then I come and support you now because you feel.
Farah, we need to wind up. I know you've been a TV host and you're giving me a hard time as well, right? Mr. Faisal, thank you very much for coming through as well. Member of the Defense, Foreign Relations, and of course Diplomacy at the National Assembly, and Member of Parliament Kamkunji. We thank you so much. Professor Mashara Munene, thank you, historian. And of course also in absentia, we want to thank Peter Kagwanja, who was meant to be here but could not make it as well. And we want to thank you for that very in-depth, very insightful conversation. The young people, of course, we are very proud of you. Continue doing that. I'm not saying that we're proud of you because now you're protesting, but it's actually you've gotten your voice again. Instead of repining and whining and complaining also on just social media as well, you're taking action to the streets to speak, of course, on the injustices of the day. And of course, this is a good token that we can see, so to speak, for the future as well. Because we always say that we've not borrowed this earth from our ancestors, or we've not inherited from our ancestors this earth, that we've borrowed it from our children. Of course, this earth is yours as well. Thank you for your valued company. You've been watching Global Today here on Morning Pride. News Diary is up next.